Good morning and happy Sunday. I had started a video yesterday and I lost it, but I'm going to try again. And the basic idea behind it was how to identify inspirations and ideas that look like they're aligning with your goal. Um, but for some reason, they look like a shortcut. So they might look like a scam or a gimmick. And how are you supposed to know that? And like what kind of cues can you kind of look for around that sort of offer, as it were, to help you kind of not fall into wanting to follow what it is and just kind of sidestep it so that you don't have anything that's going to kind of trip you up on your goal as you kind of progress through life. So, I'm going to start with trying to understand why um, angels exist in the world in ways that are difficult for us to understand. So, I talked about how um, angels exist around communities of people or an individual who are in some way praising God or trying to align with meaning and are also trying to find ways to align with the universe. So it's mostly because they are understanding that their um, purpose in life is to find ways to help people understand God because they already have basic inspiration from God. So it's almost like God's light um, has a form in the form of angels, which is called praise. So to think of it anything outside of that is very difficult for me. So I'm going to let you guys have the opportunity to kind of integrate that in whichever way makes sense for you. Now, if you sometimes see somebody outside of yourself who looks like they just did like something miraculous, like sometimes um, outside of a prophet who has this experience, we call it a karama. And that means it's kind of like a mini miracle. It's just like, it looks like something that's almost like, it looks like a trick of your eye or your mind's playing some kind of uh, trick on you. Like you don't really know how to make sense of what they're doing. And what it is, it's actually an angel that can kind of take over a person's body or an idea that makes them look like they can do something that was just like outside of what's normal for anybody. Now, it's important not to get lost in these because these can actually become ways for the devil in us, as it were, like any kind of uh, part of us that wants to take a shortcut to want to do whatever that person did or what they saw that person look like they were doing. Now, if you understand what the spiritual path is, it's almost a way of aligning with the universe and looking for ways in the universe to help you understand that you are doing an okay job and that angels are there to help you and you're not kind of deluding yourself in any way or being misled. So if you see these ways of reinforcing what you are believing, which we called like different things, we called it this gratifying meaning inside of you, we called it resonance, we called it witnessing. If you, as a person, already know that I'm on a spiritual path and I just saw something that was like, wow, it's like almost awe inspiring, and it kind of reinforces that kind of inner meaning for you, then that's good. You often just kind of like, oh, you're like grateful, and then you walk away and you're just like, oh, thank goodness. Now, if I see you doing that, right? And I think, wow, did you just do that magical power? That's what I see because I don't know anything about the spiritual path. I don't know anything about the universe. So I think, oh my goodness, I want to be you. So what might happen is I might think I'm gonna go find out, kind of like that story I told you about Halloween, where some people like they try to do some kind of shortcut. So they might decide, I'm gonna steal your identity. I'm gonna pretend that I'm um, Jacob, right? And so I'll come to you and I'll say, "Hey, Jacob." So building on that story that I mentioned in the past, about how sometimes on our path, sometimes these ideas will come and we're like, is this a good idea? And you kind of have to think about it. You're like, I'm gonna sleep on it. Like let my brain kind of decide with me and my heart decide with me, and I'll pray for inspiration, and then I'll make a decision. So if so, that could be a friend who's like, I think I'm doing something helpful for you, but I think I'm doing something helpful for me more than for you. He doesn't know that because he doesn't really know yet, or she. And so what ends up happening is if you are somebody who are trying to align with the universe, God will protect you because this person is doing an effort. He doesn't know that it's a bad shortcut yet. But because you're honestly trying to do something that's helpful for yourself, you might actually have a new challenge in front of you that's really, really, really big. And you're going to have to be really patient. But you don't know that yet because you're just like, I'm practicing anyway, like how to be patient, how to build ideas around setting my own goals. But now God's almost going to be like, you're going to have a really big goal because somebody's going to want to take a shortcut with you. And I want you to remember that you don't have any special powers, that I'm the one that's giving you these powers, and that angels are around you helping you. So now you have to remember, uh-oh, if my ego, which means there's a part of me that loves adrenaline and loves to feel strong, is going to want to say, I have all these powers, right? If this person comes to me, if Jacob or Jonah comes to me and says, hey, Jacob, I noticed that you know how to do this. Can you teach me? If you're somebody who understands God and that God is the one that's omnipotent, which means he's the one that has the power and he's the one that gives people power, then you could say, um, I can tell you what I learned, and I know something about angels that kind of help people who want to learn, but I don't think I have any extra powers. Now, Jonah is going to be like, oh, are you sure? And so now that might dissuade him, which means he might change his mind and be like, oh, you don't have any special shortcuts or magic tricks. So now he'll decide to wonder, and then maybe you guys will be friends and you'll talk with each other about, how do I understand how you live your life, and how do I understand how my life used to be, and how can I put the two together and kind of build new ideas about how to live my life. So this now begins kind of like an expansion or extension of what I talked about last time about critical thinking, where sometimes we want to understand how to build from two ideas and create a conclusion. So somehow related to the scientific method also. And what we know is that when we're trying to observe something and draw a conclusion, we have to almost see, what is it that my heart wants and that my brain wants? Because if I'm drawing a conclusion that my heart already wants something out of this, I'm not going to be thinking objectively, which means I'm going to want what my heart wants, and I'm not going to be able to think clearly about whether what my heart wants is actually a good idea or not. So let's say, for example, I want to go to the park. Not just any park, though. This is an attraction park. So it's usually one that you have to pay to go in, and there are a lot of rules around safety. So you go to the park, and then you're waiting in line for this ride, and you've waited like 2 hours, and then you get there, and then you decide, oh man, I just had a surgery for my heart, and it says that if I'm waiting in line to ride on this and I had this surgery, I actually can't ride it because it's going to be dangerous for my health. Now, you're like, but I really want to, and you're getting really upset, and you're thinking, well, I mean, the surgery was a long time ago. Maybe I'll do it anyway. So now you're not really thinking objectively. You're thinking with bias, which means you're thinking close to what your heart wants instead of what's actually good for you, right? Now it's called being subjective, which means if I was to ask, if my doctor was there, for example, or if I had another adult and I said, what do you think? I just had this surgery and I shouldn't go on this ride, but I really want to. Because that person is an objective person, which means he can look at the same scenario without that desire in your heart saying, but if you see that it's actually not going to be healthy for your heart, then it's probably not a good idea. So because it's not his desire, his way of coming to a conclusion is going to be easier for him, because he's like, it doesn't make a difference. I don't want to go on the ride. I don't have the heart surgery. It's easy for me to help you make a decision. And these are usually the friends that you want to ask for help if you're having a hard time negotiating an idea with yourself and your mind is thinking about it and you're like, I need a fresh perspective because I don't know if I'm making the right choice. My heart really wants this, but I don't know if it's a good choice for me. And I'm praying for inspiration. And because you are praying for inspiration, God will almost send people around you to help. And he'll inspire them with good ways of answering questions for you that will kind of enlighten you in a way to like a new way of thinking. So in this way, God's also encouraging that this is a social religion. Like Islam, or the way of life in the universe, is meant to help us collaborate, which means problem solve with each other. There's a whole chapter in the Quran that talks about how it's called almost like a consultation. So it's almost to say, the more people consult with other people and about different ideas, the more God's mercy almost comes down, because it just basically says that angels are coming to help you and they're inspired and they're coming to inspire all these people. So this person that you asked, he's going to say, or she's going to say, well, from my understanding, the rules for writing this is that you haven't had a surgery, that it doesn't really matter when you had the surgery. This is something permanent, that your heart is not supposed to be under a lot of stress. These rides create a lot of stress. It's happy stress, but if your heart is already on some kind of machine, then it's not your natural heart, which means you might actually end up really, really harming yourself. And you know that you have to be charitable with yourself, so you shouldn't do anything that's going to cause harm. Even if there is joy, the joy is actually going to be short term and probably not any joy at all, because the long term is going to be, you might have to do another surgery and you might end up actually dying. So now you're thinking, oh, never mind, I'm going to go find another ride that doesn't maybe have a lot of stress on my heart. So maybe a gentler ride. So in this way, you can see how critical thinking is something that we do and we get better at as we grow through time and have more dilemmas in the world, to almost help us figure out, what is it that I need to understand about the universe as I get older and become an adult? So that makes becoming an adult something that's easy and something that's enjoyable. Now, from the past, we know that the Prophet, peace be upon him, or Prophet Muhammad or Muhammad, he came with a doctrine, which is a new way of living. Before him, it was Jesus, and before him, it was Moses. And before him, it was, I think it was Ibrahim, and before Ibrahim, it was David. Now, all of these doctrines are, not all of them we have still. So, excuse me. I talked about how, let me just turn this around here. I talked about how sometimes we have, I don't know how to do this the way it was. There we go. So I talked about how sometimes we have ways of seeing that don't allow for us to almost leave the past in the past and kind of move forward. So it's almost like we're stuck in a way of thinking, and we're not allowing ourselves to think that it's safe for us to move forward, because we've been taught for so long that any kind of creativity in the way we think about the world that's different from what the Prophet used to do, we have to be careful around. So we don't even know how to be careful around them. So we just throw out all kinds of new ideas and we don't even think, how do we update them? And this is where God says, it's you're teaching yourself to be scared about something that I'm teaching you how to overcome. Because if you think about all the prophets, that is what their job was. Sure, God supported them with miracles, but he's almost allowing us to think that in spite of that, they have brains just like you have brains. And remember, the whole purpose of you living is to be able to defend your way of thinking and have the freedom to think. And these are almost like mentors. These prophets are sent to almost give you a model or like an example of, this is what you're allowed to do. You're allowed to pray and ask for inspiration and now move on with your life. You don't need actual miracles, because these miracles that usually come with these prophets often scare people, and people think they have to kill them because they think like you're doing sorcery or witchcraft or something, and then they just don't know what to do. So it's almost like saying, based on what you know, it's not really always that good to have like these really big miracles, because people think that they have to find shortcuts or like steal people or like who knows what they think when they see these things. So it's almost just live your life normally, and as you become more courageous about critical thinking, your new ideas will be able to be more accepted in the world. I will help you. Like, this is what God would be saying. So now, if you think about that, you can say, okay, I'm going to try to remember the best way to live in life and not to take shortcuts. So if somebody says to me, the best way to learn, for example, is just to take other people's notes and read them. You can say, okay, but I don't know that person's learning style, so maybe I should learn on my own and then ask for that person's notes, or maybe you just talk about my ideas with them. So in that way, you're allowing a little bit of that consultation to happen in your life, and then you can think about how your ideas are the same and or how their ideas are the same, and then how they're different. And from that, you can, again, almost synthesize like we talked about in that last video. So I'm going to end there, and then next video I want to talk a little bit about what we can understand about snakes, because we usually have that story around Moses where he has a staff that turns into a snake. A staff is kind of like a walking stick, and we understand from wizards is that they can turn their surroundings with like the zap of a wizard or that staff into some kind of like magic or something, can kind of transform in a way. So I want to hold on to that idea, in that things don't transform. That's just like the way that, like in a Halloween way, they kind of made the story like a mythology or like a really imaginative idea of thinking of change. But it's to say that with time, we are allowed to change. It's like the idea of doctrines or new books that come and kind of upgrade or help us think that you can keep some of what was in the past, but you also can forget about some of it and you can update with new ideas. And these new ideas are going to be valid for a little bit. People are going to understand them in a lot of different ways. And then through time, they'll continue to update and create new ones. And the idea of a snake is not to be a scary one or to be a sneaky one, but it's almost to say, anytime there is that newness in the world, um, because the evil in us, or like there's parts of us and other people who don't want other people to do good or to do better than us, sometimes we hold each other back by accident. Like it's almost like, I want to be the best person, and someone will say, no, 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 I want to be the best person. And then they'll fight and hold each other back, almost to trip each other. When it could be, let's encourage each other and try to work together and try to uh, figure out ways that we can almost finagle like new ideas, which means almost like grapple with them or like really, really struggle with them until we create a new one and then find ways to support our new idea in the world. And then we both win and we can have other people support us. So there's one person that I'm following on Instagram, and I just noticed that she's been building a lot of videos on her own. And I guess she has such a massive following now that she actually looks like she hired somebody to help her. So in this way, it's almost like we have so many creative ways where we can recruit people to help us if we're working to a common goal. And that way we're not actually hurting each other on our spiritual path.